So first off, before we get going, let's set the scene and say, like, why is this important, what we're talking about right now, and preservation of culture? How do cultural objects shape who we are as people? And how do they kind of shape what we do as a society? Karl, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? I mean, when I was in advertising, I took that responsibility that the stuff that we produce, right, to help sell whatever it is, it's actually, for better or worse, contributing to the culture, right? It's contributing to the discourse. It's feeding ideas into people. Things become. Now we have memes. Back then, they weren't memes. They were like, talk of the town ads or campaigns and things like that. And so they both capture the voice of what's happening around, but they also add to it, right? And I don't know if it's preserving. It's a really hard thing, but it's everything around us. I believe really shapes who we are and how we think and how we see the world and our priorities, right? So what we invest in, how we like what I'm doing now, what we invest in terms of the music or the art that we're producing or the commercials we're producing. They have an impact, whether subtly or not so subtly, on how people think and behave and act. And I think there's probably thousands of easy case studies that we can pull up, or thousands of examples of things happening around the world right now that have changed, that we've seen the impact of all the media and all these outlets, which really sort of add to the societal discourse.
Chiko, you're an architect, you design buildings. How do buildings turn into cultural objects which shape who we are as people and who we are as a society?
Yes. Like a bamboo in Bali is like a very substantial material we use for the ceremonial. We use anything like our things like traditionally from bamboo. So we are very good in art, but we are lack in productivity because we are Balis, like have a lot of cultural activities that taking our productivity is so low. So when I found that I'm working with the concrete building, I design and take the jobs for the concrete building. It's not making any impact enough. And then when I saw starting with bamboo, it's so powerful.
Chiko is frozen for us, at least. Anyone else? I guess everyone else can't hear Chiko as well. Okay, Chiko, are you still there?
Not stable.
Hi. Sorry, we lost you there. Can you go again, please? Okay, Chiko's moving. While we do that, maybe I can hand over to Alvin. Alvin, you're an architect by training as well. How do buildings, how do intangible cultural heritage things like trams influence who we are as people?
Well, certainly, we need not any professional training to understand that culture always provide the most important reference for how we think, how we act, and how we communicate, right? And just to recap, one very simple phrase by a very famous architect, Richard Rogers, who of course built Pompidou in Paris. He said that we shape our city, but also the city shapes us, right? But in a more specific terms, I think he's talking about the urban culture specifically. That basically, I think for a while that, for instance, modernism has gone very much towards the path of functionalism and utilitarian kind of thinking. But everyone then think that, oh, then where's the meaning of things? We are not only machines, right? So we certainly need culture as well, that to really give us reference for how we make meaningful acts. So I think it's a very important topic.
Yeah, I think it is. And in the same way, I want us to clarify before we get into other areas, I want to clarify what we mean when we say that culture is under threat. Like, what threats are we talking about here? Chiko, how is the culture that you're defending or that you're developing and allowing to flourish, how is it under threat? And what are these forces?
Yeah. So when Bali have a very fast growing development, I see our local is kind of competing with the others human source. So because we have a lot of culture that we have to preserve, we always do some like tradition. It's taking a lot of time, and mostly for the Balinese, it's like hard to competing with the time like office hour 8 to 5 and 12 days for off, and it's hard for them to compete with other people from other islands or the province. So in the concrete competition, it's a lot of that Balinese taking a lot of source from other island and country. So it makes a lot of Balinese become like just watching and waiting, just and have no really good income. So I see when we doing some bamboo, we are good at it. Like our craftsman is like I think it's like we believe we are so strong in that art craftsmanship. That's why when the meet of the technology from other countries like Germany, Colombia, and they teach us how to make a strong building, how to treat bamboo, and meet the art of Balinese hands, it makes a lot of something new to show to the world, and it's growing now, and a lot of people have a lot of jobs that other people can be replaced. Not easy to be have. They can follow, but they cannot get the aura or something like that. That's I think.
So you take
helping
external
bamboo
forces. So you take external forces and ideas and use them to boost what you're already doing, rather than seeing them as a replacement or a threat to what you're doing.
Yes.
And Karl, what's your perspective on this?
It's a question that makes me feel actually physically a little bit uncomfortable, and I think maybe that's a good thing. And in one way, I'd like to say I think there are probably specific cases where we can say certain traditions or aspects of culture are under threat, maybe. Now, whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, I think we probably have to go case by case. But is culture really under threat? I think it's always evolving and changing. And then how do we discuss this without either A, sounding too romantic, right? Oh, we got to hold on to the past, or B, too elitist, right? Because I think in many ways, my thinking of this keeps going back and forth. So with technology, it's a lot easier for people to maybe contribute and participate and co-create the culture, but then does it even things out, right? Do the fine artists sort of get mixed in with the weekend, photographers and so on and so forth? And so what do we mean by culture? Who are the beacons of culture? Or is it something that just becomes very sort of dumbed down? And I don't use that word intentionally. It is kind of what it is, right? So certain forms of culture are under threat, I would guess, but it depends how precious you are going to be about that, or what do we do if that's the reality? How do we do to make sure that, that we still have something sort of like inspiring and aspirational and something that sort of adds value to our daily lives. I think things like short attention spans that are coming along with the busy days and busy sort of lifestyles that we have. Those are things that maybe in my point make culture come under threat, because people maybe don't have the time to really appreciate it anymore. And I think that's sort of a big rabbit hole we can maybe get into, but that's my top sort of thoughts on it.
And Alvin, you're taking something that is over 100 years old and already exists.
116.
116. Wow, still exists, but you're kind of doing something new with it. In a way, the trams aren't under threat because they're still a common use of transportation, right?
It is under
What do you,
threat.
how is it under threat then?
Well, it's a very interesting case, and I think it's a particularly relevant question for Hong Kong, where we are, two of us are now. First of all, the tram itself is unlike most of the other quote-unquote heritage, which is under the Development Bureau policy area. In Hong Kong, it's under the transport policy. So basically, it doesn't have any idea about preservation or conservation of culture because they're not dealing with historic buildings.
So it's been conserved by accident.
It's certainly conserved by accidents because tram was actually quite a popular public transport system in many cities, especially, well, certainly in Asia. Most of the major cities used to have tram, or in Europe they call it streetcars, right? Or in America they call it streetcars. But then most of them were removed when they start to build the underground, the tube. So Hong Kong, as you said, by accident have saved this system. And as I mentioned, it's 116 years old. Imagine in Hong Kong, how many of these historic buildings do we have more than 100 years old?
Very few.
Very, very, very few. So certainly, it's not about a very deliberate strategy to save it. But somehow it's been kept because it is basically because it's not invaded by the developer. Because the tram doesn't run on vacant land that could be demolished and make new buildings. So somehow it's really almost like with an ecological point of view, it doesn't have a natural kind of predator, but I think it's under threat now because now, of course, Hong Kong has its underground for some 40 years, and there's certain voices that it should be removed because it's not efficient enough. But then, I'm sure every Hong Kong citizen will be against that motion. Then what is that? Why is that? I believe that it is because of the cultural value of the tram, not so much of the transport value or the functional value of the tram.
Every time I met with friends when I first moved to Hong Kong a few years ago, I was late for drinks and dinner. And my friends would say, "Oh, you took the tram again, didn't you?" Because I wanted to, because it was cool, because it was uniquely Hong Kong. And I knew I'd get there slower than if I took the MTR, but I did it anyway because I wanted to, especially in the first few months living here. I thought it was so cool. And it's that intangible kind of cultural draw it has. My next question I'm going to ask to all three of you, but it maybe makes sense to go to you straight away with this, which is, what are you doing to preserve this culture? What is your company doing to preserve this culture of trams in Hong Kong?
First of all, I do not use the approach of preservation. From my training, architecture training, there is very different approaches towards, in a way, rescuing or saving culture. And to me, using the architectural terminology, it's more like an adaptive reuse approach that we use. It's not preservation, it's not conservation, but a more, in a way, provocative approach, meaning that we try not to mummify what it was, but we are only saving the essential elements of the tram and then bring it with or convert it with a new design. So for instance, the tram I've been running now, it doesn't have the same metal skin, it becomes transparent, but the wood structure is saved. The mechanical system entirely outdated. We converted the entire electrical and mechanical system, so it has water, a lot of electricity, a lot of power. So it is about distilling, filtering the best from history and then bring it to the future.
Interesting. So, Chiko, what about you? What are you doing to preserve culture through your work?
Yeah, from our field, we are doing a lot of with hands. that we are forgetting because we have a lot of machine with big production. With the bamboo, we growing up with more in the hand skill. So we are Balinese very close with using hands. So the hands, when we producing like custom made, is the important that we back again to reuse our hands to make something. It's not too fast, it's not too slow, but we have to back to our natural timing. So in the big production where which is a lot of machine that we use, so the destruction is faster, I think. So we reduce a little bit, reduce our speed. We make something like more handfully beautiful art craftsman and things like that, and become not too massive. So I always love to be in the custom made things, make something new design. It's more have a natural timing to be when the planting grows, and they have a natural, and they have to time to make another plant to grow. So we try to back to that timeline.
So there's some things you're not willing to compromise on.
Yes, the thing is too fast. I think is to have a effect of destruction, and then with the hands we have more time. We have time to make doing some our culture, and we have a lot of tradition that we can retouch again with something new like Alvin doing, but it's maybe in the building or product or something like that. Some old traditional design that we can explore more. That's my thing about the preserve the culture, and I think it's worked with the local people in here.
And Karl, what about you? In your capacity at Warner Music Thailand, what are you doing to preserve musical culture?
Yeah, I think, for where I'm sitting, it's more contribution rather than preserving. We're a modern music company, so we're not necessarily focused on, traditional Thai instruments and folk songs. That said, we do have a couple of artists who are basically, 40-year legends here. So yes, we are preserving their catalog and a lot of the work from that era and getting it up onto the streaming platforms and so on and so forth. But the main focus is really sort of getting behind the artists we see who are going to contribute to the platform. I guess the most Thai part of it is probably the language. And I think on a more subtle level, these are Thai artists who grew up in Thailand, and although they may be doing music of a more international genre, it is infused with Thainess and all those influences that they've grown up with, whether it's the lyrical content, the melodies, the instrumentations, and so on and so forth. So it's really investing in them and then using the power of the network, because I'm an international label, to try to see if and where it makes sense to expand the stage and to amplify them and to maybe cross-pollinate with other artists in the region, and then, see how far we can take things. So that's what we're doing.
I also want to ask you a question, something that you raised when we spoke before, which is, when official bodies are trying to preserve culture, governments and so on, or help culture bloom, there is sometimes a fetishization of these kind of traditional crafts over new cultural ventures. If you drape yourself in traditional clothing and the instruments of your country, you're much more likely to get government funding and get exposure. But if you're making really amazing shoegaze music or post-punk or whatever, you're less likely to get that attention or funding. So how does someone in your chair manage between those two in preserving culture, but not doing it at the expense of what new culture, what new stuff that's coming out?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I think, it's a lot of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps yourself, right? At the end of the day, you have responsibility to your artists and your team and the bottom line and so forth. So what I have been trying to do is work with other labels and partner with them and see what we can do in the absence of any sort of sort of lean forward public support. I mean, we see cases like in Korea in the past where I think, their cultural explosion since the late 80s has really been, especially music-wise, we see K-pop as a global sensation.
Yeah.
From what I understand, their government was really behind that, really pushing behind that and invested in that. Whereas in Thailand, it's a bit different. So it's more like, we have a one district, one product program where everybody sells their traditional product from whatever that county is, or we have Thai silk, Thai food. It's very cliche. It's good. It all has value. But, so if they're focused on that for the time being, while we try to lobby the government, and there are some festivals and some local organizers who we work with who are starting to get some inroads with some sort of tangential government agencies. We just have to help ourselves, right, and then get the word out there, and get people to turn to to flick that switch that culture doesn't mean 200 years ago, right? It's what's happening now as well, and they're both equally valuable. But and for me, they're both equally Thai. Even Thai artists, I have 2 or 3 who perform in English. They're Thai, right? It is the world that it is right now.
Right. And Chiko, you're also modernizing. You're modernizing a traditional craft. And as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, you're using these international techniques from Germany or Argentina or wherever to improve on a traditional Balinese craft. So what's your take on this confluence of tradition and modernity?
Yes, we are Balinese is good into keeping things always like traditional way. So we are very lack of innovation because we always preserving like culture. It's always like that before. It's always like that before. So that's our Balinese like tradition when we believe something like innovation. So with our responsibility to become a designer. So we try to make something that with their basic capability, and we try to make something new, even just slightly different, but it's giving something always innovation in bamboo. So it's growing. Like
can you give an example?
Yes, like weaving, like weaving. So we have 1,000 years of doing weaving. Like we make ogo-ogo, the statue on the nyepi. That's very ancient technique that we can do something with it as like decorative sculpture, interior design. It's one big word only from weaving bamboo. It's making 1,000 income for the villagers. Like 5 cents per split of bamboo is if everybody use it. So economic will be like turning inside the village. So I found in this one material is a lot of things that we can observe, mixed with the culture and our capability in art. Is going to be beyond, I think. So this is, I think, in Bali is just the beginning. So we're waiting for
seeing what you have to cook up. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, this is just first 10 years that is growing. So we're waiting a lot of new students that will become architects. So we can influence people like to use this material to explore more and giving back to the community, to the people, and to the mother of nature.
So right now your bamboo village is made up of a handful of houses made entirely of bamboo as a construction material. What's your ambition over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, this is the part of the link. It's not planning. It's just growing by itself somehow. So we are and created by the people who help and still alive now. So this is the link that's going to be, oh, this is the product. One possibility is the building that can make income. You can be renting and you can use as a villa. And a lot of people appreciate things like that. So we start the bamboo factory to supplies. So you can see the supplies, you can see the forest, and the next step, we go to the more deep. We go to the planting. So we giving back. So maybe every building that we make, we're going to planting our 100 bamboo. So that's 5 pillars will be helping us to support that part to how to make a circle, a link. So we have the product from the bottom to the top and from the top to the bottom. So we make a link chain for bamboo economic in Bali.
And Lord knows bamboo grows fast enough. A reminder to everybody that's watching to leave your questions in the chat box in Zoom. I'm looking at it right now on this computer, and I will ask your question. If you have a question to just one panelist or all 3 of our panelists, that's both okay. I will ask whatever comes in the chat box. But Alvin, I want to ask you a question, my friend in the same room, which means I can take off these headphones. Seems like you have a similar, I don't want to use the word disdain, but similar qualms about preservation, maybe as Karl. You said when we've spoken before that you're, quote, allergic to preservation. Why are you allergic to preservation? Do you think how is it damaging?
Well, I will try to answer this in relation also to your previous question. Because obviously the government has its policy silos. And usually it's not only Hong Kong, same in China, in Taiwan, most of the other places. Cultural heritage were in a way funded or supported in terms of public funding within the Ministry of Culture that, of course, Hong Kong doesn't even have a Ministry of Culture or a bureau, policy bureau of culture. And then usually there's another ministry or bureau in charge of innovation or creative industry. But going back to the very fundamental question you ask, culture, as of course I think we will all agree, has to do with future, have to do with creativity. It gives us meaning and energy and inspiration to move forward, right? So that becomes problematic because then the cultural ministry will be only looking into preservation in my kind of definition.
Right, looking backwards.
But looking backwards. But then you have the tech people looking forward, but without much meanings. Pure science, pure technology, without cultural and social meanings, right? So, and I'm not only blaming the government because even many of the charities from families or family office or the foundations and trusts, most of them, they're actually quite conservative in thinking about this. And I really look forward that there could be new organization that could combine some of these interests all together. And I think that should be the trend in the immediate future. So declare myself, well, my Tram doesn't we didn't get any of the government public funding simply because there's no existing funding scheme that would suit us, because we're precisely combining heritage, 116 years old, and then future use, new design, creativity, and so forth.
So the key is to be looking ahead at the future, but with an eye on the past, right? You can't have one at the expense of the other.
Not from past to present or present to future, but from past to the future. And we need that kind of support.
Karl, when we spoke before, you said that Bangkok is a creative but messy place. Is it in the kind of way that Alvin's referring to, in that, I've been to Bangkok many times, I love it. There's a lot of tradition. There's also a lot of people like going at breakneck speed towards the future. Is that what makes it creative yet messy, that kind of mix of modern and tradition?
it's not very structured. That's what I mean. But I also think creativity doesn't necessarily, I mean, it can work within a framework, but I think creativity in one of its aspects should be messy, right? I think, but I think what I mean is it's not a city design. It's not like, I grew up in Canada and it's a great city. Toronto's a great city. And there are areas that feel very artistic, but it's not messy. Everything's built on a grid and everything works on time and so forth. Or regionally, even in Singapore, it's a similar feeling. Hong Kong gives me that messy feeling as well. But what I find in Thailand, the Thai people have a very creative spirit. I mean, I gave a talk at FCS a few years ago, and the one picture in my mind was, I took it on the road, was like, you've got this concrete sidewalk and you've got grass just coming out, like it's forcing itself out, it's cracking the concrete from underneath. And that to me is creativity in Thailand. Whatever the barriers or whatever the limitations are, Thai people are going to find ways to express themselves, even if it makes a mess, right? So we could empower them structurally as a society, as a city, as a government, to give them the tools or the places or the forum that artists need to actually express their creativity. But even if you don't, Thais are going to express themselves somehow and create things. So, you can work with, or you cannot do anything, or you can go the opposite extreme, which isn't the case here, and go against and sort of suppress all that. So I guess that's what I kind of mean about the messiness, on top of the speed of life here, and everything's just sort of really, really fast. And yeah, it has developed really quickly, and technology is just adding to that, those green shoots coming out everywhere. People are expressing themselves more and more and more.
Culture and creativity doesn't grow on a framework, as you said, but there are certain pillars, governments and music label executives such as yourself, who can empower and can kind of catalyze culture and creativity. How do you do that? How do you empower artists? Particularly, how do you empower creativity, help people make a living through their work without kind of dictating that they produce something which is like blandly commercial? How do you walk that line between like encouraging creativity and expression, but also helping them make a living through their work and also being a viable business for you?
Well, frankly, we have to. The times have changed now in terms of, in the past, the record label was kind of, the big behemoth saying, you must do this, you must do that. Now with technology, people are so empowered, it's easier and it's not as expensive to produce music, to get something up on YouTube, to get it up on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. So to actually show value, we actually have, it's a partnership now. I think that's the way I look at it, right? So it really depends on that relationship. Do you believe in the artist? Do they believe in you? And it's an investment. I mean, there's no sure bets. It's almost like being a sort of like a soft skill VC kind of thing. How fast do we think we can develop you, and do we think we can work together? Does the label have the tools that you don't have, and do you have the content and the vision that the label believes in? And then we just work with each other. I guess we have money and we have the intention and we have the network, but there's no, if I'd figured it out, I'd probably not be here. I'd probably be in New York or London or something like that right now. So it's something that we're working through, but Warner as a group and myself, it really is about empowering the artist rather than dictating, and that's just our attitude towards working it. And that's, I think, where we can, as a brand, I guess that's where we hope we can be a point of difference and attract the right artists that fit with us, rather than, there's so many people who can sing, who look great and have talent, but they might not be artists. We want the artists to come here.
Sure. Well said. Alvin, I'm going to ask you a question from the audience, which is also along this theme of tradition in culture versus innovation. So this question is from Shan from the Philippines. Hi, Shan. Thank you so much for your question. Shan asks, I've always been pondering, how do we infuse innovation and culture together, especially in my field, that is architecture? How do we fuse innovation and culture together, and how are you doing it?
Well, it's a big question with so many different possibilities to answer this. But I don't want to simply tell you what, or put from a creative design point of view. But I think it's a very interesting time now, 2020. And I think people have to step back, especially young architects or architecture students. If you try to think in terms of opportunities, it's abundance now, because we are totally in a very terrifying time, even using the business term real estate. Besides housing, I think most of the architectural typology, as we called it traditionally, commercial real estate, shopping malls, offices, they were all about to be disrupted because they were not making money and no one wants them anymore. Of course, no one goes shopping anymore.
Right.
The office doesn't work. People, now started with co-working space, but also not working now. Yeah. In the last 3-5 years, in at least in this region, Hong Kong and China. So it's actually a beautiful time to infuse innovation and culture. I don't have a definite answer, but certainly there are lots of opportunities. Because I've been working with developers, besides my Tram business, I work as a consultant for 20 years. It's actually the last 2-3 years, the big boss, the managing director or CEO of the developers are looking for something new. In the old days, it's all about repackaging. It's not about anything really innovative. But now I think it's a very interesting time because they know they're actually facing real radical challenge today. So innovation and culture were two approach that not fully explored and developed yet in the development sector, in the architectural design sector. A lot of things has been done in terms of cost calculation, in terms of engineering and so forth. But I think it could be a very interesting starting point.
Are buildings culture?
Well, usually people will ask them, what's the difference between buildings and architecture? And some people might say that buildings with meaning or building with culture is basically architecture.
Right.
So certainly there's an aspiration for good buildings to be part of the culture, meaning something that lasts and something that demonstrates quality. I think that those two keywords, quality, for instance, relates to the ideology of culture. Yeah.
I think it's one element of culture in Hong Kong that hasn't really survived that well. There's great music and art culture, there's great food culture, there's great transport culture, but the buildings just haven't survived. If you look at a photo of the Hong Kong skyline in 1985, it's unrecognizable.
In our sector, we have a different argument or discourse. Hong Kong has the best city or urbanity, but we have basically no architecture. If you look into, of course, Hong Kong is known for its skylines, right? Thousands of skyscrapers together. Any great architecture would disappear from this collective effort.
Yeah.
So it's a very different approach comparing to the landmarks in London, in Paris, New York, and so forth. Hong Kong has a slightly different approach in terms of how to build up its architectural quality.
I agree with Karl. I think Hong Kong is creatively very messy, but in a brilliant way. Karl, talking about tech and how it affects music, what about the issue of discoverability? You know, with so much content out there, with it never being easier, to produce music, to produce art, to produce whatever. There's a barrage of things out there, and at the same time, algorithms kind of keep us as consumers in our comfortable boxes where it's difficult to find new talent. So in what ways does technology actually impede new culture and discovering new ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a double-edged kind of thing here, right? I mean, it's really, technology has really democratized things in terms of, you know, we're not reliant upon this media outlet to tell us what to listen to or what to focus on or what is is hot and what is not, right? But that being said, I think there's 40,000 songs a day going up onto Spotify and probably 10 times that much going up onto YouTube, right? So
Yeah.
how do you get discovered, or how do music lovers discover things that are new, right? I think that's really difficult, and it's something that we're struggling with, to be honest. I think what's happening right now is still in that sort of, the ground is still shifting, and I still believe that there are key influencers out there, or influential channels or media that can help get discovered to get you in the right place, but it's not clear who those people are or what those channels are right now. And I think that in the wash, it will end up being a lot of mini stars and less superstars. So you will end up being, you will be super hot in your lane, right? You'll be the best lo-fi, or whatever, like something like that, right? But how I discover people, there are tools and algorithms and things like that being developed, so we can search the internet for people whose socials are going up and whose streams are going up and so on and so forth. But then once you got that on board, how do you get them and expand their audience? And I think that's going to be a very granular, very data driven, and it's good. It empowers a lot more people, but it just makes the work a lot harder. It used to be just get on the radio, you'll be fine. Get on MTV, you'll be fine, right? But now that's not even relevant anymore.
Right, now it's get the likes on YouTube.
Yeah.
A reminder that we are still taking questions from the audience. Chan and Shan Ho Wang, I see you chatting, and thank you for that. Thank you for your comments. If you have further questions, please do throw them out to the panel. We have about 10 minutes remaining of our discussion. Chiko, I want to talk to all three of you about good case studies of preservation. What for you is the best case study you can point to of like, this is the way to preserve tradition while also innovating?
Yes, I think for the case study in Bali, how to preserve is when the developing is too fast, we cannot, the culture will be people will have no time to do the culture. So we have to make the slowing the time, but with the, I think the art and it's a good way to express and Bali people, and in meantime still making some income. And I think that's the key how to preserve the culture in here. So if the development too fast, everybody will be so tired and no time for doing something like creative.
Karl, what for you is the gold standard? What do you point to as a great example?
If we're talking like pure preservation, from where I sit in Thailand anyway, it's not music for sure, it's food, right? I think Thai food is really a strong ambassador of Thai culture. It's very historical, but it's also not stuck in the past. So you have modern interpretations of Thai food, you have Thai fine dining, you have Thai food traveling around the world. And I think maybe there's different cultural elements or cultural entities that some may lend themselves to preservation more than others, right? Some other things, I see some modern architecture that's inspired by historical things, inspired by stupas and things like that. To me, that's sort of like inspiration and taking it forward. But for pure preservation, something like food, I think is the one that will sort of last a long time.
Right, and that's so often the case in a number of different cultures and in different parts across the world, right? Sometimes a food can last longer than a language.
Yeah.
Alvin, what do you think?
Well, I don't have besides my Tram, I don't have
you can plug your own stuff.
I don't have a good case here, but I do have some great problems because I have the privilege to teach, so I come across a lot of the students' hypotheses. One of my students from the MA course in Arts and Cultural Entrepreneurship in London, Central St. Martin's, they were interested in street graffiti. Now, back to preservation, as you mentioned a few times today, we have huge, in a way, intellectual debate about what is the best way to save street art. Should we spend a lot of money, use the museum approach to save them in the museum, or the more digital ways to archive them? Or I personally would prefer a lot more that it should be saved right there, because that's the spirit of street graffiti, right? Meaning that the students have to propose new form of organization that could actually work on the streets to save them. So those were the great problems. And I think that as we talk about even quote unquote preservation, following what I mentioned before, I think we do need innovation, not only in terms of technology, not in terms of thinking, but also new form of organization, which is probably deinstitutionalized, unlike the big institution as we had before. I think that will also shed new lights onto cultural development.
Right. I think we have another question. I'm gonna, this one is for Chiko. Chiko, Ipe asks, could you explain more what systematic design in the Eco-Village Bali, which related to traditional but transformed in an innovative way?
Yeah, so we're starting the Sansang Eco Village as a pioneering about the how the community can make a resort or something like a bamboo village. So the Sansang is not one big investment, one man show. It's a lot of people is that supporting to buy the housing. So we have already like eight clients that to support us and become a community there. And I'm one of something like making. So the Sansang is not just for accommodation. So it's like a central point for like all the eco business. So like me, I built a bamboo factory on the land. So bamboo factory is a part of the eco business, and there's something new coming up is the furniture production. So somebody investing in the furniture, and before the pandemic we have a lot of opportunity, but it's not happened yet, like a hub in there or a jungle gym, and farming is still have a lot of big opportunity to become one point of eco business. So that's the and Susan become the sample to that type of business in another province in Indonesia, even in around the world. So it's will generate like local economy. It will help to preserve the natural resourcing, like our forest, destruction from the forest, and like not to destruct the world faster.
It's like you said before, this is only the beginning, right? And on that positive note, I think we are basically out of time. What I want to leave everybody with is a final question, which is, if the audience takes one thing away from this panel, what do you want it to be? Chiko.
So from receiving a lot from the panelists, is encourage us to to do more innovation, and basically on and try to, like Karl, maybe searching more traditional heritage that we can modify to be something. I'm going to make like something like developing bamboo home or artwork business. I think that's something new that I found in this panel. So
okay. Sorry, Alvin. If you want to leave the audience with, if you want them to leave this discussion with one thing that you said this afternoon, what should it be?
Be an entrepreneur. If you can't because your family needs a stable income, be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Be innovative.
Okay, amazing. And final word lies with you, Karl. One thing you want the audience to take away from this discussion?
It's just a few words. Appreciate, I think, see the value in the culture around you that maybe you wouldn't notice from day to day, from basic things like the music you listen to, the buildings you see, the food you eat, and so forth, but also participate, lean in, right? We are all sort of contributors to the culture and to the quality of the culture, right? I mean, it can be as shallow or as rich as we want it to be, right? So, we can live in a 15-second TikTok world, or we can read a book, right? I mean, or we can do both. That's fine. And really celebrate those who really, whatever they are, whether it's the fine artists or the musicians or the architects or whatever, celebrate what they do and really, that circles back to appreciate. And I think we'll create something, cities that are rich and interesting and soul informing in the future.
Well, that's a beautiful note to leave things on. Thank you so much, Karl, Chiko, and Alvin, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you, too, for joining us for this discussion. It's been a pleasure to come back to FCS for a third year in a row to moderate. Thank you so much for having me again. And with that, we'll say good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.